Hi, everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Supply Chain Talk. It's great that you're here to join us today, and hopefully you interact, you enjoy. What we're doing here is talking about the topical issues of supply chains. Last week, if you were joining that, my colleague Sam was hosting it, talking about robotics and automation for warehousing and delivery. Very much a Middle East flavour to that discussion, which was great. So good to be able to listen back on that and to hear those discussions. This week, we're focusing on supply chain skills and the skills that people need for the future. I think in previous episodes, we've touched on talent, we've touched on talent shortages. And this week, we really want to hone in onto what are those skills for the future and how do we help people build up those skills that they need to really be effective in supply chain as we go forward. We're in a challenging time. We know that we've got a lot of real challenges ahead. So it's going to be interesting just to get people's perspective, their thoughts on what that looks like. We've got three guests joining us today. We've got one from the UK, we've got someone else from Germany, and we actually have someone from Australia. And we'll introduce her in a minute. But she's got up very early in the morning to be able to join us, which is great. So a good international flavour to the discussion today. Those of you who have joined Supply Chain Talk in the past will know that we do it in a couple of ways. We'll choose a topical story and we'll bring that up in a minute. And then we do go into that broader panel discussion. Those of you who are watching us live, you have the chance to interact. We really would enjoy any one of you who wants to add stuff into chat to let us know, A, that you're here, and B, any sort of comments or thoughts you've got on what we're saying and how we're taking it forward. I think Supply Chain Elf and Leron and Trudy have already put some comments into the chat, so thank you for that. And we also have Q&A. So if you have a specific question that you'd like me to bring up with one of the speakers, please do raise it, and I'll happily pick that up and take it to them. As a bit of incentive, we have a wonderful Supply Chain Talk mug, which we will go put to the person who comes up with the best comment or question as we go through. And before I get asked the question, I know there's a few people still waiting for those supply chain mugs to be delivered. We may have a little supply chain delivery problem, but we know we will get those out to you as soon as we can. So delighted to have the opportunity to join you again today and to hopefully get you to interact with us as we go forward. So let's bring on our first guest for today. Well, let's just say hello to a few people. We've got Thomas from Ghana. We've got Ashley that's here as well. We've got a few others that have joined us. So welcome to you all. Our first guest is Hervé Douin. And Hervé, if you'd like to join us. And for those of you who know that technology is our friend at the moment, Hervé, I think about 30 seconds before we went live, just managed to get everything working properly. But it's great to see you actually here, Hervé. And if you could turn your microphone on as well, that would be great, so we can hear you as well. So welcome to you.
Yes.
Excellent, Hervé. So welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I think you just a quick introduction to yourself, and we'll put your profile up. But I think you've recently left working for Airbus, where you worked there for many years. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes. So, but I was very recently head of quality transport and logistics. And thank you again, Duquesne and Daniel, for this invitation, for these great talks. And for me, yes, I have more than 17 years of experience in supply chain management and in different areas, engineering, quality, supply chain procurement. And I really saw that it was important to up skills, or to learn, to constantly learn, and to have always new skills, especially when we change totally different areas. And also I have passions for emotional intelligence in industry, which really helped me and my team to overcome a lot of crises. So in a nutshell, this is how I would like to present myself. And thanks again for the invitation.
That's great. And thank you for joining us, Hervé. And I think the topic of emotional intelligence we'll come back to when we're talking about the skills that we think people need, and specifically those around that. So thank you for that. Just having a look through the chat, we've got Donald here from Brazil. We've got Asmini from Tanzania and James from London. So really good to see you all also joining us today. Thank you for that. So, Hervé, there's the article that we wanted to sort of use to open the show. It was one that I think was published yesterday in Future Scott, and it was about a Herbert Watt University launching their new sort of online master's program, digital learning platform that they've got to sort of help everyone to educate virtually. And actually, they were launching it today at the Expo 2020 out in the UAE as being a sort of big showcase for them. But I thought it was really interesting when I looked at the article and I looked at the news story there. There was a few things that stuck out for me. One was that they were reflecting what we've all seen is a significant shift to online and digital learning for everybody now, away from the more traditional classroom or university environments. They were reflecting on the fact that we really everyone needed to upskill and to build those skills for the future and to take those forward. And I think Supply Chain Elf has just posted that up for us, so thank you. There's a key stat in there, which I think we just scrolled through, which was about the fact that the adult learning environment is growing from $36 billion in 2019 up to $74 billion by 2025. In a way, a doubling of the scale of investment that people are making in themselves as they go forward. And that more and more people now are recognizing that they don't have the time maybe to take out and study formally, but they need to study much more in a on-demand, interactive way as they go through. But I think, Harriet Watt is just one example of the sort of what everyone's facing in terms of that sort of move to more digital online approach. I know I work for the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and we did exactly the same. We took everything online. We moved it to that sort of more virtual digital environment. So, I mean, for you, does that strike a chord with what you see in this sort of skills market at the moment?
Yes, what I really see, and thanks for sharing this article for this Scottish university, because their target population is not the people from 20 years old. Their target population are the people from 30 to 40 years old, which for me was very interesting, because I would like to say in a classical approach, we think that, let's say we study until 25, and after we work, and after we don't have any more to study anymore. We have our diploma, tick in the box, MBA, engineering diploma, and it's finished. Wow, no class anymore. And we could see really that it's not the case anymore. And I think the COVID situation have reminded us how important it is to upgrade our skills, because everything is changing. We are moving much more digital. We are moving toward Industry 4.0. And it means that the pace of the change in supply chain is getting even higher than it was before. So I found this initiative at the university really great, because it's not possible to attend sometimes physically. We have seen it's sometimes hard to travel during the pandemic situations, but to give, let's say, this knowledge to people who have already 10 years, 20 years of experience, and to allow them to have a master, because they propose that master, I think is really great. And we need to find time, even if it's challenging with our private life and professional life. But in emotional intelligence, one of our needs is grow. One of our needs we have as human beings is to grow and not to be static. And I think it answers perfectly the answer where digitally we can have great contents on digitalization in supply chain management.
I think that's a really important point about sort of, we probably all recognize we've got skills that we need to develop. And as you say, that target audience they were talking about was sort of 30 to 40. I'm probably a bit older than that. But I've got to say that the level of learning that I'm still going through, both about procurement and supply chain, about the applications of technology, I have to say, running these episodes has been great, because I've learned about all sorts of other topics that maybe I hadn't really learned about before. And just investing that time in learning in this environment is something that we all have to do. And I mean, I know you've recently left Airbus, but was Airbus also investing sort of heavily in this area to get all their sort of skills and their people up to speed?
Definitely. There was a platform which has been, let's say, developed in so-called MyPulse, where there is a platform for e-learning. We have a huge database of e-learning, and employees can choose themselves their e-learning. Because before we need to ask to the manager to have an approval, but many e-learnings, let's say, available for free, let's say, to the people. And I think it's really great, because it's a change of mindset. We trust the people that they are doing the training which are relevant for themselves and their work, and we can do it, of course, online. So yes, definitely, Airbus have invested a lot on it, and it was for me very, very fruitful.
Yeah, and I know Airbus have been doing it for many years. I remember SIPS at one point was providing some content into that sort of e-learning for procurement people. But it is that piece of, providing it so that people can dip in when they need to, at the time zones and when they feel like it. And we've seen that growth globally, where people now are saying, well, I want to provide the same education, but I want to provide it to everybody, rather than just being those who are lucky enough to come into my campus, whether it's in London or it's in Hamburg or it's in Sydney. I want to provide the same education to everybody wherever they are in the world, and I think that's quite a big change, I think, from maybe where we were 3 or 4 years ago.
Exactly, and also there is two change I would like to say is in these e-learnings. Sometimes it is employees who are doing the e-learnings and explain the knowledge really applicable in our specific requirement. It's not a general training. So that's the first thing. So we have generous colleagues. We are doing training, explaining their job, and it's great for newcomers, for example. That's the first thing. It's not only consultants or external company who are doing the training. And the second aspect I would like to say on the big change is it's not anymore where we have to book 3-4 days of training in a room. You can train all the time. And I think this is also a key to succeed right now, is to dedicate every week or every 2 weeks sometimes to learn and grow and learning new skills. And here, thanks to the digitalizations, it is possible.
Yeah. And hopefully Supply Chain Talk is one example of that, where people can join and learn about different topics at different times. And I've just been scrolling through the other people on the chat who've joined us. We've got people from Uganda and Bangladesh and others taking the opportunity to join something that maybe they would never have been able to join us before. So it's great to see those guys there. So Hervé, thank you for that. I'd like to bring in my other two guests, if I may, and then we'll sort of get their views and comments as we go through as well. So maybe if Ian Aibke, you could join us. Ian's the head of supply chain for Lantmannen Unibake UK.
Hello.
And I'm sure we'll understand a bit more about your company in a minute. And also Tanya Siri, who's joining us. She's the one that's got up very early in the morning. I think she said it was sort of just about 3:15 or 4:15 now in the morning in Australia. So welcome to you, Tanya. Thank you very much for joining us today and for getting up so early. And hopefully, as I think you said, your husband was bringing you some cups of coffee to get you started this morning. So all you need is your Supply Chain Talk mug. Probably we should have shipped one out to you beforehand. So welcome to you, Tanya. So Ian, just before we sort of drop back into the story, maybe just, I looked up your company when I knew you were joining here and to see what you did, but it wasn't necessarily a name that jumped off the page to me. So what does Lantmannen Unibake do? What's your focus? What's your role there?
So my role is UK supply chain, but if I step back to the parent company, it's actually an interesting business model. It's effectively a cooperative owned by about 27,000 Swedish farmers. They have 5 different divisions, mostly based in Scandinavia and the Baltics. The Unibake division, though, that I work for, Duncan, is the piece that takes the grain that's been converted to flour and makes it into food. Very simplistically put. So we have a really good strap line, field to fork. We distribute various types of bread, mostly through the food service channel in the UK, and then Danish and French pastries into nearly all of the major UK retailers, and then probably export about 15% of our volume. And my role is to manage all of that domestic and international supply chain.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. And Tanya, you said got up early. So you're the founder of Procurious. I know Procurious for many years, but maybe for the rest of the audience, just sort of explain your role and what Procurious is.
Oh, thank you, Duncan. Yes, I think we last caught up in Berlin, which seems a lifetime ago now. Yes, so Procurious is an online network for procurement professionals. We've got 40,000 members around the world. And I guess just to your point today, it really is about making learning accessible, bite-sized learning of relevant topics, but also helping people create a network, which I think is really important for the holistic learning experience as well.
And maybe building on that, Tanya, because that's something that sort of Procurious have done to try and build that like network, people learning from each other, people asking questions and getting responses, posting sort of things. I mean, is that continuing to grow? Are you seeing more demand for that as we go forward?
Look, our membership is growing and people are accessing blogs and the webinars and what have you, but I think people are still hesitant to really join an online conversation. So we do have some good conversations, but I think most of us are sort of lurking on social media and watching more than participating. And, I think that's a great opportunity for the profession, particularly as we enter this, talent war at the moment, is that really people do want to work for influential CPOs and they want to work with, we have to promote ourselves as an employer of choice. So social media is the perfect place to do that.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, it's one of those interesting bits, hasn't it? It's gone from, do you observe or do you actually participate and join, as you're describing? And in any,
it takes a lot of confidence.
Yeah, it does, and it's that stepping forward, and maybe we'll come back to the emotional intelligence piece there of feeling like it's okay to step in and do that sort of stuff and add it through. So that's probably a theme we'll come back to on that. And Ian, I mean, from your perspective and from looking at sort of development of skills generally within Unibake and across the broader sort of consortium, I mean, is the digital world moving forward there, or is it still?
Yeah, very much so. Only about 9 months ago, actually, but Unibake has put a very similar e-learning set of modules in across, but not just across supply chain. You name it, really, from sort of leadership skills to lean techniques, Excel skills, etc. The only, I guess, not concern, but gap we've found is people are missing that bit of interaction that a face-to-face can give. And we've tried social media tools. So we use Yammer, for example, as a medium to try and get people to share experiences. But actually what we're finding of most benefit, which is actually putting in place a network of super users, coaches, mentors, who people can pick up the phone or use teams like this face-to-face to actually test out the learning on, or just ask questions in terms of whatever the course is, whatever doubts they've got in their minds. And that last bit that we've only recently put in place has really made a difference. We've seen a real uptick in the number of people taking up the material because they've now got that facility to ask questions and understand it a bit to a greater level of depth.
But I think that's an interesting take on learning, isn't it? That actually the traditional sort of learning was, you'll turn up to a session like this, I'll talk you through 50 slides, and then I hope that you've learned something and away you go. Whereas now, I'd expect you to have done some pre-reading before you get there.
Yeah.
And then in this forum, we'll discuss and bring it to life for people. And therefore, you're interacting, but not expecting people to talk you through. We're just relaunching all of our skills training and our modules that we've done, and we've done exactly that. And it took a while for us to get a head around the fact that it's not that traditional, okay, it's online, but I'm still going to teach you. It's online, and I'm going to try and make you interact and talk about your experiences and challenges and learn from each other. And it's a different way of learning. And I suppose that's, back to the news story here. That's what Heriot Watt are trying, and what most universities have done as they've gone online, through the lockdowns. Yeah.
The other interesting point it raised for me, and it may not be directly related, or it's just coincidence, is the fact that they're making such a big deal about this being online supply chain learning, and I think the issues in the last 18 months in Europe, more around Brexit, but also Corona, to hear now government ministers regularly citing logistics and supply chain as being sort of key concerns for them, I think it's really going to make a difference in terms of moving on to what we're going to talk about. What skills, therefore, if people now are hearing supply chain more and perhaps starting to understand it and maybe want to take it up as a career, to then think about, well, what skills are going to be needed going forward. But I thought that was an interesting perspective, just this greater profile of supply chain over the last few months,
Yeah, no, we've never been so popular, for good and bad reasons. But in a way, and I think your point is well made there about the the skill set, because we have never been so popular, and there's lots of organisations now who are starting to fully understand the fact that they've got a complicated supply chain, and B, that the people who are managing the suppliers, the supply chain, don't necessarily have the right skill sets to do it. And there's that sort of pent-up demand almost for where are these people going to come from. So let's move into that section. I know in the chat, Supply Chain Elf has just posted the key questions here, but these supply chain skills for the future. I mean, the first one is really, what skills do modern supply chain and procurement professionals need to be successful? I mean, what are those sort of broad skill sets? I mean, Hervé, maybe sort of, I know you started with emotional intelligence, and I think that was really good to sort of that sort of. I don't like to use the word soft skill because I don't think it is a soft skill. I think it's a business skill that people need to do.
Yes.
Sort of
And after the COVID, it become a hard skill, I would say.
Well, that's true. And obviously, that's one that you're really sort of passionate about that people need to develop. Maybe let's explore that. So why do you think it's such an important skill for people in supply chain to have that sort of emotional intelligence?
Okay, so why? And especially right now, because there is a skills in leadership. What I have seen and experienced with my team in transport and logistics during the COVID was a skill of flexibility, or mental flexibility, because we are in a so-called VUCA world, vulnerability, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think everyone faced it during the COVID when we have to adapt very shortly, because we had, for example, to face a rate of 40% less reductions, 40% less reduction in 1 month. We never faced it in the medical industry before. And we see that people are afraid. People were really afraid. And why emotional intelligence? And I would make a link with Industry 4.0, because a lot of person, and I attended a lot of supply chain summit. And most of the time we talk about what are the skills supply chain leaders need to have are analytics, artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, how to imagine and apply the technology to advance digital supply chain. Okay, 90% at least of the symposium or summit I attended were around those skills. What about the people? Okay, and it's very funny. Look, the Wikipedia definition of Industry 4.0. They said the Industry 4.0 foster what we call smart manufacturing. So what is smart manufacturing? It is a vision of a production environment in which production facilities and logistics systems are organized without human intervention. Wow. When you are an employee in a company and you read these definitions, when everyone asks you to deploy Industry 4.0, do you think you will smile and embark the change very easily? Or you will ask yourself the question, what will be my role in the future? Okay, and here comes emotional intelligence, because all the question is, how can we remove the fears, okay, in the mind of the employees when we want, for example, to move toward more digitalizations? Because I strongly believe there is also a huge opportunity for a lot of people. All those tasks which were repetitive and with no added value can be replaced, and the machine can really help individuals. And it comes back of what you have said at the beginning, Dukan, that with the university, we will have to, let's say, upgrade our skills. And why emotional intelligence? Because in such change, what I have noticed for myself as well is we experience a lot of emotions. Sometimes we have never faced. Emotion of frustrations, emotion of fears, emotions of sadness, because we had also family. We had sometimes issues in our private life with the COVID, okay? And we have never learned at school how to handle our own emotions. And it's so important, especially when you are a leader, not only to understand ourselves, which is the basis, but also to understand the emotion of others, to have empathy during a crisis. Even if we have a lot of challenge on the business or operational area, it's so important to understand the emotion of others and to manage them. And also to understand the emotion of our own suppliers, of the customers. Something we have not learned, and that's the reason why I think is the key skills we need to have. And by the way, there are studies which has been done, which have shown that top leaders score very high in emotional intelligence. Okay, and we have seen that today only 36% of individuals in the company, in a lot of studies, are able to spot correctly their own emotions. So it is a vast area we have not learned. And when I was at Supply Chain Summit, a lot of managers, plant leaders, Industry 4.0 leaders told me, "Oh, Hervé, it's not totally true what you are saying, but we have never learned it, or very few." And that's the reason why my point of view is, as supply chain leader, as we have to deal with supplier, customer, a lot of different part of the organizations, where sometimes we have conflicting objectives. We have conflicting objectives, and when it is conflicting objectives, means sometimes high level of emotions. We need to handle it, okay? And that's the reason why it's so important as a skills.
That's brilliant, Hervé. Thank you. And you say it's a hard skill to learn and develop, but it's a good one to sort of really tune into as you go through. And I know, Tanya, from hearing you up, maybe it was Berlin at the conference we were in a few years ago, but I know it's something that you've also been very passionate about in terms of the skill set of procurement and supply people and what they need in the future. So have you changed over the years, or are you still very much in that sense of those skills are imperative?
Yeah, no, look, I'm just more excited than ever about the future for the profession, because if you look at the frequency and magnitude of these disruptions that we've seen, particularly in the last couple of years, they're just increasing, and the velocity of change is incredible. And so this presents a real opportunity for procurement professionals, and Hervé touched on this, is this agility. We have to be able to think on our feet. I mean, some of the Procurious research we've done during the pandemic has really shown that procurement professionals nailed it. I mean, most people globally took only 2 weeks to find alternate suppliers and really bounce back. And how did they do that? They did that because they had relationships with people. We actually don't have the supply chain visibility that we so desperately need. So, people actually had to go back to, who do I know? Who can I trust? And, really used that skill that Hervé is, mentioning, and that's the relationship. So I think that's one really great point that we have to develop. That's soft skills. Soft skills aren't soft skills anymore. They're hard skills. They're technical skills. And the second point is, if you look at the way the world is moving, if you look what investors are looking for, customers, ESG is where it's at right now, which has been an unexpected outcome of COVID. So if you look at those ESG elements, this is a whole new world for procurement, and we can't be stuck in the back room just processing POs and issuing RFPs. We need to be out there looking at alternative energy sources, social procurement, all these other issues that are so interesting and that our customers and stakeholders really care about. So what I've been saying is, actually, the more advanced these issues become, actually the more human we have to become, because technology will be running around in the background, but these ESG issues are very sort of human issues that we've developed. We're a machine ourselves that are a billion years old, or however long we've been evolving for, that really are in the best position to make some of these decisions that need to be made today. So I don't think we should be afraid of the technology, and I think that we should keep growing and learning about all these new areas, because there's so much value we can add.
I think that's a really good point, Tanya. And actually, you've answered one of the questions that's come in from Ashley Cook, because Ashley was saying he's just been in a previous webinar, whether sustainability is one of those sort of, or ESG is one of those sort of skills that we all need and we should be taking a lead on. And actually, in previous episode of Supply Chain Talk, we've covered that off as well in terms of, I'm sure we'll come back to it. It is absolutely center and heart of what we need to do. But what I found interesting in talking to people about it is there's such a broad definition and such a breadth of things that you could do that sometimes it's a bit of, I'm not sure where to start, as against focusing on some elements of it and at least starting to make some of the changes and learning more about the things that you can do and the things you can influence in that space.
Yeah, well, I think, if we think about terms that we're using right now that we weren't using 2 years ago, decarbonising our supply chain. I don't remember talking about that at our Big Ideas Summit in London, 2 years ago. And this is a collaborative thing. Once again, going back to the soft skills, we have to actually represent our businesses and talk to everyone in our supply chain and work through these issues. So once again, these are more soft skills, but also technical. You know, we have to know what we're talking about when we talk about decarbonisation. So I'm a lifelong learner, and you know, I think it's exciting that we've got all these new areas that we need to master.
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone the other day about, you know, you talk about scope 1 emissions and scope 2 emissions and then scope 3 emissions, and those 3 words come out, and then you say, so just explain to me scope 3. You know, and then sort of this blank look comes over their faces. Well, I think I know, but I'm not quite sure. But you're absolutely right. It's that you need to build up that technical insight, but also then know how to influence them as they go forward. And I agree with you. I think it's a fundamental skill that we all need as we go forward. So that's a really good point. Ian, let's bring you in. So, I mean, from your perspective, looking at those sort of modern skills for a professional going forward, what would you add to the ones that Hervé and Tanya brought up?
I think the big. I mean, I feel there's a lot of existing supply chain skills that are actually just being reinforced. First of all, but I think the big change we all need to think about is the increasing focus on artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, 5G is coming along, and generally access to data is going to be a lot faster. And I can't now see who put the comment in the text, but I think a lot of entry roles leave the POs to the robots. A lot of entry roles are going to be far less transactional. They're just not going to exist because it'll all be done by computers, by robots. You know, so much will just change. A lot even short and medium term demand planning decisions won't need human intervention almost, because the systems will be clever enough. So I think a big change going forward is getting people who there'll probably almost be 2 career paths for me. There'll be one almost like a technical operator who really wants to get into the technology and drive improvements and implement, and almost like a semi-engineering type approach. But then for the more general supply chain population, the roles will become much more like strategic almost, in that we'll need to step out more, have an understanding of all the technology, but really think about how we're going to apply it. So if to give an example, maybe, I think at the moment, if you talk about collaboration between manufacturers and retailers, that is fairly linear at the moment. It's one retailer to a number of manufacturers, but it's all individual, and it's probably all on a day or longer lead time. As data improves, all of that collaboration can become almost 3-dimensional, because it can be instant between retailers, manufacturers, their third-party logistics providers, and having people with that sort of vision to say, right, I'm just giving one example here, you know, what's that going to mean? How can we apply that to our set of circumstances? It's the biggest change for me. And then, if I could just quickly, you know, a few of the things that I think have always been around and will continue to be around are managing having really good project management skills, really good risk management, problem solving, being agile and quick on your feet. Fairly standard stuff, but I don't think those are going to go away. Basically, I think they sort of continue. But the big one's going to be the huge change driven by increased use of technology.
I think that probably goes back to Hervé, where you started from, isn't it? The technology's there, and that, you know, but it's how to use it, how to apply it, and how to sort of add the human element to the automation of technology that should make processes more efficient, should give us greater visibility and data. But you need to apply those skills effectively. But I think one of the questions that was in here from James Smith about there's so many technology advancements in the industry. How do you keep track of what's important to your business? And then do you reskill or hire new people who've got the training but lack the experience? So I suppose that's really a question about technology, that as you look for those skills, can you learn them? Or do you need to bring people in who've really got that passion for the technology and the application of it to do probably what you just said there, Ian, and where you started from? I don't know. It's an open question, really. What's your thoughts? Can you learn it, or do you need to hire people who've got that skill set?
Yes, so I see. Yes, several. Say also many technology advancements. This one. Which one? Because there is a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's about technology advancement. It was about sort of how do you keep up to date with what you need for your business?
Mhm.
And based on that, do you reskill people, or do you hire in people who've got that technical capability?
Yeah, so there is a lot, as stated, of technology coming on, and I think Jan, you have summarized them. You're talking about 5G, artificial intelligence, robotic, and a lot of things. And there is also, I would like to say, sometimes quite buzzword, and we need to define what is really useful, especially in our industry, because e-commerce is not the aeronautical industry, for example. We don't have the same rates. We don't have the same, so sometimes it's slower than other industry. So what we have, in order to tackle and to keep track of what is important, we have dedicated projects in supply chain, for example, which are led by teams. For example, one is named, my memory, Strongers, where we want to have an end-to-end supply chain, and they assess which kind of technologies we will need for example, to optimize the supply chain in aeronautical industry. So we have dedicated teams, let's say, who focus on this, okay, and really try to see what is useful and what, for the time being, is not a priority, because trying to deploy everything at the same time will not be also beneficial.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it's a combination. It is maybe not an answer, a full answer, but if I look at our business, we have a set of, rather than having experts in, so we're in about 40 different countries, our part of land manning, and rather than having experts in inverted commas in every country, there's a team based out of the headquarters in Copenhagen who are looking more to the future. And for example, we're now saying, well, we're not particularly seasonal. If I just use our fast food business as an example, with the Internet of Things, it would be great to know where barbecues, big social events are being held, because that's a sales opportunity. So that's being researched centrally for then us to be taught locally almost how to apply it. And then so that hopefully half answers how we do it. The other side, I'd say, in a way, some of this stuff is no different than when ERP systems came in 20, 25 years ago, or, I put in Manugistics 20 years ago. And my approach would be, you always try and either learn it yourself or teach existing employees, because that's the best way from an engagement and continuity point of view. But sometimes you do need to bring in some early adapters and make that step change. If it's a really big leap, not necessarily everyone's able to make that change, which is just, I think a function of everybody's, probably everyone's experienced that at some stage in their career. You hit a brick wall. I finally gave up trying to write macros in Excel, and employed someone to do it, as an example, that sort of thing. So I think it's a bit of a mix, personally.
Right. And maybe just one of the other points we wanted to cover here is about the best approaches to developing skills, because I think we've highlighted some of those skills that we believe are important, but then we sort of say, well, what's the best way of developing the skills in people? I mean, Tanya, maybe sort of come to you, because I know you've got a certain slant on this in terms of how you think people should learn and how to absorb and learn from each other. So what's your view about the best way of people developing their supply chain skills and capabilities?
Well, look, I think you've got to tick all the boxes. Obviously, SIPS does a fantastic job with providing the backbone for our profession with the accreditation. So, that's fabulous. You've got to tick that box. And then you've got to go and do your specialist courses in your area of, focus. But I really just think people can't underestimate the value of what I would call collaborative learning. What we're doing here today, having a discussion, reaching out to your peers and having a conversation, all the members of your supply chain, because actually, that's a huge source of knowledge. By having 4 of us here, you're multiplying. Well, we've all just had at least 10 years experience. So you've got 40 years or 80 years experience just here. So I just think that we've got a tendency to stick in our silos and stay within our companies, and I think we're missing a big opportunity from learning from others. So I'd say just keep your eye and mind open to collaborative learning as well.
And I think that's facilitating that collaborative learning is quite a challenge, though, isn't it? We try and do it in sector groups as an example, and then you get all this competition concerns. So actually trying to choose the right environment where you can get people to collaborate and learn from each other is quite a challenge.
Absolutely, but it's not impossible. And the thing is that there are only, we can put the boundaries on these competitive issues, but on the whole, most things in our, our professional development are not competitive. Certainly when we're talking about supply and gaining competitive advantage. But yeah, I think, it's really part of a multi sort of disciplinary approach, I guess. And what we've always said about training for the last, however long is you've got to be able to implement what you learn, and you've got to be able to stress test it and develop the right behaviors. And I think, working with your peers or your supply chain is perfect. The other thing I'd say about technology is, look, if anyone out there gets the opportunity to be in charge of technology buying, they should take it, because that's the future. A lot of the CPOs that I'm seeing get appointed now have a big technology procurement background. Sustainability is obviously also a big background, but it is definitely a hot skill, actually, the ability to buy technology.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tanya. So let's just sort of focus on those developing the skills. So the collaborative learning that Tanya's talked on is one way. I think we already touched on things like a whole bank of e-learning and giving people access to learning so they can sort of self-serve themselves. I mean, is that the modern way? Is that the best way in which people can actually develop the skills in the current environment?
I think that it needs to be when they need it. Like you're going into work, you're on the in the underground or wherever you are in the world, you're on a tram and you've got a negotiation that day and you think, I just want to listen to a 10-minute podcast that will really get me in the zone and just remind me of a few tips. Or, oh God, I've got a 10 o'clock meeting on, how blockchain is relevant for ethical sourcing. How can I quickly look at that? So I think that's a way that these bite-sized learning opportunities are actually helping people in their day jobs. So it's a very pragmatic approach, as well as the longer-term sort of, pathways to professional accreditation.
Yeah, we're doing some work with a large social media company, and absolutely they were driving us very much into that sort of bite-sized learning that people could access when they wanted to. And we had to change our way of how we deliver that learning to really accommodate their requirements. And I think, Tanya, that sort of plays that point. I mean, Hervé, Ian, I mean, just any comments, any additions to that in terms of how people develop their skills?
Yes, some comments to Tanya. What I think people also can develop their skills is also using, I would like to say, collective intelligence internally. What we have done, for example, in Airbus, we have really developed the concept of co-development. So, especially there is challenges which are also done with new technologies. We don't have the answer, but it means that all participants, let's say, receive and gives. So, for example, one can ask a sessions, and he comes with a problem. He has an operational problem, or it could be a leadership problem. And you are in a group of 6 to 8 persons, and we are here to help. For example, so there is a kind of coaching exercise where the person presents the problem. After we ask questions to the person, for example, explains the situation, and we give after a feedback, and the person finish with concrete actions. And for me, this is a way to develop the skills because we have a concrete issue to solve. And it's linked to emotional intelligence. Why? Because people have to also be mature enough to ask, to show their vulnerabilities. Because it's not so easy sometimes to ask for help. Okay? And this exercise, I would like to say, improve active listening, empathy, and force participants to welcome and reflect before accepting and rejecting ideas. That's the first point. The second point to complete, Tanya, and I think you have a great service to provide because you, let's say, have a social network in supply chain and you gather people. So you are doing kind of mastermind sessions, and that's great. I can only encourage to seek as well the knowledge outside. Thanks to networking with other professionals, attending forum, supply chain manufacturing summit. We need also to have knowledge from outside. We cannot have all the knowledge in our own company. So this is a way also to upgrade, let's say, the skill of our teams. People who are highly engaged, motivated, to offer them the opportunity to go to such forum, for example, Industry 4.0. Another concrete area I have done with my team and we have developed is a nomination of champions, let's say per expertise. And for example, could be a champions who are known to be an expert in one area. Could be a champion in artificial intelligence, could be a champion in robotics, could be a champion in, for example, ERP. And this person is known as a champion from all the teams. And it means each time you have a kind of question in this area, we know that this person of the team, this team is here for the team, is known as an expert, as a champion. And there is two advantages. The first is, of course, people, when they don't know, they know how to contact. But the other advantage I would like to say is also very great for the champion because the person is really recognized for his expertise. They can help the team. And it's all about give and take. And this is a way as well for me to upgrade, let's say, the teams.
Really good point, Hervé, and some very good insights. And I think you've answered one of the questions that Ashley Cook asked about should we take a leaf out of the tech groups by having open forums? And I think you've just answered that question, which is yes. We should. And we should have that. I think sort of Tanya also covered that off as well. So I mean, I think we're all saying there's the whole mix of ways of developing skills. And I think Ian, you sort of came back to some of the skills are the same. Any additional thoughts on that in terms of approaches to developing skills?
No, this might be stating the obvious, but I think we've all talked about learning, but the proof of the pudding for me, whether you've really learned it, is doing it. So the final bit and we facilitate this through our job reviews and development plan discussions. But if someone expresses an interest in something, yes, we'll train them, but we'll actually find them, and it could be a piece of work in a completely different part of the business to actually go and apply it and do it. Don't just theoretically read about it and tick the box sort of thing. It's actually go now and run a project or spend a day a week working on whatever it may be. I've got a guy working for me at the moment who's actually, part-time, who's in sales. So there's a link into what I'm about, just as an example again. He's really interested in sustainability. He's working with me, talking to the retailers to increase order sizes, which will mean less frequent deliveries, less road miles, less carbon dioxide emitted. So he's getting his learning and we're getting a benefit from it. So I think that's the only point I'd stress. It's important to actually apply it and do it as well as learn it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point.
Very good point.
There was going to be another point we're going to come to, which is how do you attract people to the profession, but we're not going to have time, right? Because not only have we only covered probably a bit of the topic we're going to have, but that's probably in itself a complete new topic in itself. And I know we probably need to come back to it. But I think what's been interesting for me, looking at the questions and looking at the comments, these sort of the focus on sustainability that's coming through, the focus on technology, the skill set. There's some comment in there about this sort of, these skills that we need are just business skills for the future, that we actually building up those leaders for the future as well. And I think there's a lot of sort of very relevant comments in there. But we're going to have to wrap this up. And I'm sure it's a topic we need to come back to because we haven't done it justice, I don't think, in the time we've had. But I recognise that, Tanya probably needs to go and have a doze now, having sort of got up so early. So thank you for that. And both to yourself, Hervé, and to Ian as well. Really do appreciate your time today, joining me in this episode of Supply Chain Talk. It's been excellent and a really good input from the three of you. So really appreciate that. Thank you. And I'd say thank you also to the people who've been participating on the chat and in the questions. We haven't had time to get to them all. There's some really good additional questions there I'd love to have had time to get to, but maybe we need to sort of park those and use those as a format for a future Supply Chain Talk. I did promise someone would get the mug, and I was looking through the best questions and the ones that maybe stimulated the thoughts best. And I think it'd probably go to, I think it was James, I think it was, who sort of, or John Richards, I think, about supply chain futures, and then there's something about graduates as well. So I think we'll pick that one up as being one of the best questions about sort of the use of technology and the way that we take that forward. So really appreciate that, and we'll make sure we get a mug out to you as well. Need to wrap this one up. We have the next episode of Supply Chain Talk, which is next week, which is going to be on sustainability in distribution. So I know we've already touched on sustainability, we're going to really hone on the focus of that in distribution. And maybe, Ian, based on what you just said, you need to come back and share some of your thoughts on that one as well. So really looking forward to that episode, which will be next week. But in the meantime, I said, Tanya, Ian, thank you very much for your contribution. It's been an excellent session today. And thanks everyone for joining us on the chat and the QA. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.